invisible zippers. Ah! Nah, they're not that bad. Today's tutorial is all about how to install an invisible zipper. So if that's something that you might be interested in, please keep on watching. Hey Stitchers, your girl Kris here. Welcome or welcome back to my channel on social, where you already know it's totally cool to be obsessed with sewing. So for today's video, we're going to be talking about invisible zippers. Now, invisible zippers sort of scare a lot of people in the sewing community. I have seen many people saying that they avoid a particular make because it requires the installation of an invisible zipper. Now, thankfully, your girl is not afraid of invisible zippers, and I have picked up a couple tips and tricks along the way for installing a clean invisible zipper. And that is what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today, how I go about installing my invisible zippers. Now, this installation process has worked wonders for me. It's not foolproof, and I'm pretty sure that there are other ways that invisible zippers can be installed. I have seen other people install invisible zippers different ways. So if this works for you, then kudos. If not, then you're free to give another tutorial a try. But I just thought that I should share with you guys how I go about installing my invisible zipper. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and I hope that it will be beneficial to you in your sewing. And if you have been afraid of invisible zippers before, I'm hoping that at the end of this tutorial, that fear would be gone. So let's get started. As usual, just before we get into the tutorial, I know you guys are curious about what I'm wearing. So today I'm wearing the Love Notions Cadence dress, but you guys, I have hacked this pattern probably beyond recognition. I did a full blog post over on the Love Notions website that you could go ahead and check out to see how I went about establishing this hack. Just to let you know, the cadence dress is like a shift dress, and I changed it to have gathers at my shoulder line. I changed it to have shirring at my waist, and I changed it to have like a tiered skirt. So it's got the shirring here. This is actually the bodice piece, and I just sort of demarcated the waistline with the shirring. And then the skirt piece is two tiers, the main skirt and then the skirt ruffle. Now, I'm not sure if you were able to see all of that, but I'll be sure to go ahead and pop in some pictures or a twirl or something so that you guys can see what this dress looks like in full. Now, a quick plug, I am a Love Notions ambassador, and if you use my code, I'll go ahead and drop it down in the description box. Then you can save yourself 10% off any Love Notions purchases. You don't have to use my code if you don't want to, but if you do see something on the Love Notions site that you are interested in, then I will absolutely love if you would consider using my ambassador code. So now that you guys know what I'm wearing, let's get started on today's tutorial. So these are my two skirt back pieces, and I'm going to be inserting my invisible zipper in my back center back seam. Now, the first thing I like to do when inserting my zippers, I like to make sure that I have finished the inside of my skirt seam, which I have done with my serger. But I have not yet finished my center back seam because I also like to go in and add a strip of interfacing wherever I'm going to be placing my zipper. So my first step is going to be to fuse a piece of interfacing that's 5/8 of an inch in width down the center back of my skirt just below my zipper tape length. So I'm going to go ahead to my ironing board and fuse a strip of fusible interfacing to my center back skirt. I've gone ahead and I've attached the narrow strip of fusible interfacing to my center back seam, and now I'm going to go ahead and finish my center back seam off with my serger. My center back seams have been finished, and let me just point out that I did not pattern match my center back skirt panels. The reason being is that this skirt is actually for somebody else, and they wanted the extra fabric in order to make a shirt. And I would not have had enough fabric to go in and pattern match my center back seam and still have enough left over for the shirt. So for those of you who are very pedantic, you might have noticed that my center back seams are not identical, and I just figured I should point that out. Now that my center back seams have been finished, my next step is to go in and I'm going to mark 6/8 of an inch seam allowance from the top raw edge of my waistband. Now the seam allowance on this skirt is 5/8 of an inch, and when I attach my waistline facing to my waistband main using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I like the top of my zipper tape to be about 1/8 of an inch away from that finished seam. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm using my Nancy Zimmerman seam gauge, which I love and which you can find in my Amazon store if you're interested, to mark out my 6/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to slide the gauge to 6/8 of an inch, which is right here. I'm going to line up this green portion of the gauge with my waistline seam, and then I'm going to run my charcoal liner right along this edge down here. So I'm just placing the gauge right at my waistband seam, and I'm using it and marking out 6/8 of an inch seam allowance from my top raw edge. I'm going to repeat the process on the opposite side of my skirt piece. All right, so those have been marked in. At this point, you want to grab your zipper. I've got my zipper. This is an invisible zipper. You will notice that you can't see any teeth outside of the zipper tape. So it's completely invisible. When you open it, then you can see the zipper teeth. Now this is a 12-inch zipper, and I would have preferred like a 9-inch zipper, but I don't have any. And technically speaking, I could go in and shorten the zipper, but it's not going to make much of a difference. And so I'm just going to leave it as is and put this zipper tape into my skirt. Now, because my zipper tape is narrower than my seam allowance, I need to go in and mark in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance down my center back seam. So again, I'm going to draw for my seam gauge. This time I'm going to set it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance right here. And then I'm going to mark in my seam allowance down the center back of my skirt. And I'm going to do this on both sides of my skirt. All right, so once my seam allowances have been marked in, I'll move this out of the way for the minute. I'm going to unzip my zipper tape. I'm going to place it next to my skirt, and then I want to flip my zipper tape. So right side of my zipper tape is right side to my skirt. And I'm going to be lining up my zipper stop, which is this bit right here, with the seam allowance marking towards the top of my waistband and down the side of my skirt. So at the little intersection here, that's where the zipper stop will go. So again, I'm going to place my zip next to my fabric. The right side of the zip is facing up. The right side of the skirt is facing up. Then I'm just going to flip my zip to the right side of my zipper tape is going to touch the right side of my skirt, and I'm going to pin it in place right the way down where I have marked my seam allowance. Once it has been pinned in place, I'm now going to take it to my sewing machine, and I'm actually going to install my invisible zip using an invisible zipper foot. Now I know everybody doesn't have an invisible zipper foot, and I have seen invisible zippers being installed with a regular zipper foot, but I find it so much easier to use my invisible zipper foot, and since I have one, I am going to use it for this skirt. Now I'm going to sew it down the length of my zipper tape, being sure to slightly open my zipper teeth as I go, and I'm going to stitch it using my regular stitch length of 2.5 millimeters. Just in case you guys don't know the difference, this is my invisible zipper foot, and it has a groove right down the center, and your zipper teeth actually slip in between the two sides of the grooves, depending which side of your zipper tape you're attaching. And this, on the other hand, is a regular zipper foot, and it actually runs up against the teeth just on one side. So you might be able to see how installing with an invisible zipper foot will be so much easier because your grooves actually fit into the slot of the foot. So again, I'm going to go ahead and use my invisible zipper foot for this install. This is what my skirt now looks like. If I zip my zipper up, we can see that the zipper tape has been installed pretty close to the edge of my skirt. Now, I like to sew as close to my zipper tape as I can, but the thicker the fabric that you're using, you might need to leave just a tiny little gap between your zipper tape teeth and where you sew, because you don't want to get your fabric caught in your zipper tape as you're trying to zip it and unzip it. So now that we have installed one side, we now need to bring the other side of our skirt into play. Now, I would like my zipper to match across my waistline seam. Now, if I had pattern matched the back of my skirt, then I would have been attempting to match the left and right sides of my skirt all the way down my zipper tape. Because my skirt is not pattern matched, I don't need to take care when I'm installing the zipper all the way down to make sure that the left and right back skirt pieces line up. But I do want to make sure that my waistband seam lines up or is close to as being lined up as I can get it. Now, I like to zip my zipper tape up like so, and I like to use my chackle liner to mark across my zipper tape just about where my center back waistband seam is. So I know some people clip it, as it were, but I just like to use a tiny mark which goes from my waistband seam straight across my zipper tape, and I'm going to use this as a guide to line up the opposite side of my skirt. So I'm going to unzip my skirt, and again I'm going to lay my zipper tape next to my skirt piece, and then I'm going to flip my zipper tape over so the right side of the zipper tape is now down on the right side of the skirt. Now, doing the second portion of your skirt is a little trickier than the first side, obviously, because now you're trying to match up your seams or your pattern, as it were, going down your zipper tape. So I'm first going to line up my marking guide with my waistband seam, and I'm going to put a pin to hold it in place. Then I'm going to make sure that the top of my zipper top meets the intersection of the marking we did at the top of our waistband and the side seam, seam allowance down the side of our center back. And I'm also going to pin that in place. I'm then going to pin the rest of my zipper tape going down and along my seam allowance. Now you'll notice that there's like a kink or twist in my zipper tape right here, and that means that you have done it correctly, matching the right side of your zipper tape to the right side of your skirt. Now, as a quick bonus, I do like to install my center back zippers where I can before attaching my side seams. Now, that is not always the case and it's not always possible, but where it is possible, I like to install my zipper in my center back seam or my side back seam or whatever before I round out my skirt by attaching my front skirt to my back skirt at the side seams. It's just so much easier with less fabric to maneuver under my sewing machine. Now that I have my zipper tape pinned into place, sometimes I do take time to hand stitch down my zipper tape so that I can double check that my seams line up before taking it to the machine. Because I'm only concerned with matching my waistband seam, I'm actually going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to do a basting stitch from the top of my zipper tape to just below my waistband seam. That will allow me to remove the pins and just double check that my center back seam lines up at the waistband. So I'm going to go ahead to the machine now, and again I'm going to use a basting stitch, the longest stitch length I have, which on my machine is I think a 6mm, and stitch from the top of my zipper stopper right here to just below, maybe about an inch or so below my waistband seam, so I can double check that they line up before I use my regular stitch length. I've basted my zip into place, just stopping right here. And so I'm just going to double check to see if my left and right skirt pieces line up. All right, so I've done up my zip. And you can see this is my waistline seam on the right side, and this is my waistline seam on the left side. So it's a fraction of an inch, not an inch, a fraction of an eighth away. And I think if I just shift it just a tad bit down, then it will be perfect. So I'm going to take it to my sewing machine now and stitch it in using a regular stitch length of 2.5 millimeters. It's time for the moment of truth. Both sides of my zipper tape have been installed, and I'm just going to zip it up. And this is how our invisible zipper looks. So I'm just going to hold it up so you guys can see how much it has been matched across the center back waistband. Now again, it's just like a titch. It's barely noticeable that this side is just slightly over my right side. You can barely see it, and you would have to be like super pedantic to unpick the zipper tape to fix this. I am quite pleased with it, and now I can go ahead and finish off the rest of my center back seam. Now to do that, we need to join right sides of our skirt together, and I'm just going to pin it in place. Actually, let's turn it over, and I'm just going to pin it in place right up to the opening at our zip, so right to where the zipper tape has been installed, like so. Now I'm going to use my regular universal foot, and I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance up to as far as I can get. Now I won't be able to get right up to the finishing of my zipper stitching because I'm going to need to switch to my regular zipper foot so I can get close up to the finished portion of my zip, so that when you wear your skirt, there is not a gap right in your skirt back, like a peekaboo gap. I'm going to need to close it up. So my first thing is to use my regular foot and sew up a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance up to as far as I can get without buckling my fabric near my zipper tape. I've sewn up my center back seam, and my stitches stop right here. Hope you can see it. And my zipper tape stitches stop right here. So there's maybe about a 1/2 inch that I need to go in and fill in. Let's just double check. Yep, so just about a 1/2 inch that I need to go ahead and close up. Now, if we were to stop there, then there would be this tiny gap on your center back seam, and you don't want that. You want to go ahead and close this out. So I'm going to switch now to my regular zipper foot and just close up that 1/2 inch gap. I have connected the dots. Have you guys ever played connect the dots? You know, where they have lots of dots and you use your pencil to connect them in. Well, I've just connected the dots between the center back seam, the lower center back seam, and where my zipper tape has been installed. Now, this is what my zip looks like from the inside. My zipper tape has been tacked down at my side seam, at my center back seam allowance, just so it doesn't flip around. Like, that's super annoying. So I like to secure my zipper tape ends to the seam allowance. And this is what my zip looks like from the outside. If my sides had been perfectly matched, then you would have a hard time seeing that there was actually a seam right along my center back. And I think I did a pretty good job of installing my zipper tape. Now I need to go ahead and finish off the top of my skirt and to secure the top end of my zipper tape. But I can't do that just yet. I need to go on and finish off the rest of my skirt, attaching my front skirt to my back skirt so that I have the entirety of my waistband in place, and then I could go ahead and attach my waistband facing. So fingers crossed, you guys, I remember to come back and document how I go about finishing off my waistband so that you can see how I finish off the inside of my upper zipper tape. So fingers crossed your girl remembers to do that so I can share it with you. But if not, at the very least, you have seen how to go ahead, or at least how I go ahead and install my invisible zipper tape. Now, this might not be foolproof, this might not work for everybody, but it has done wonders for me over the 6 years that I have been sewing, and I am not afraid of zips, and I don't think I ever was. I think I sort of tackled them head on, and I picked up quite a few tips and tricks along the way, which have worked wonders for me, and I'm hoping that this demonstration works wonders for you too. So fingers crossed, I'll be back when I'm almost finished with my skirt. I haven't finished my skirt side seams yet because I do want to do a quick fit-in on my client to make sure that the waistband piece is snug enough for her liking. I have gone ahead and put in my side seam pockets, which will be a surprise for her. And I figured out how I could show you how I could finish off my back waistband even before finishing the rest of my skirt. And I'm doing this because I know myself, if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. And then you guys won't have the benefit of seeing how I finish off my center back with my zipper. So this is what my facing piece looks like. It's a replica of the back waistband piece, but this piece has been interfaced on the wrong side of the fabric, and I have also gone ahead and pressed up the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to unzip our skirt. Now I absolutely need to go ahead and remove these threads so they don't get caught in my zipper tape. Now I'm going to find the center back side of my facing, which is this side, and I'm placing it right sides together with my zipper, just like so. Now, if I were using a different type of fabric, then I would have finished off the raw edge at the bottom of my waistline facing just to help preserve my fabric. But I'm not too concerned about this Ankara fabric. It is pretty sturdy and it doesn't fray a lot. So I think it will hold up well even with washing. So I'm pinning my facing piece to my back main skirt piece right side together. And I'm going to pin it all the way over to my side seam. Now, for the purpose of my demonstration, I'm going to stitch my facing piece to the back of my skirt, starting about 2/3 of the way from my center back piece. I'm not going to go all the way to my side seam because, again, I do need to go ahead and fit this skirt before I finish it up properly. But I am going to stitch using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance right the way across the top of my waistband piece. I have sewn my waistband facing to my waistband seam, and I started right here and worked my way towards the center back seam. Now that that is done, I want to go in and grade my seam allowances. So to grade my seam allowances, I'm going to use my pinking shears, which have the serrated edge like so. And I'm just going to pull away the facing piece from my main skirt. And I'm trimming down my facing piece to like a 1/4 inch or so. I'm not going to go all the way across. I'm just going to stop my grading right at my stitch point here. Again, if I were doing it in full, I would have graded right the way around my waistband seam. Now that I've got one side down, I'm going to go and clip the other side of my waistband, which is my waistband main, and I'm going to leave it slightly longer than my waistband interfaced piece. And the grading of the seam just helps your waistband to lay much flatter. Now I think I could take down just parts of my waistband facing just a little bit more, like so. Now that I have graded, I'm going to push the seam allowance towards my waistband facing. So on the wrong side, it's going to be pressed away from your waistband up towards your waistband facing. And this is what it looks like on the right side. And I'm just going to go and understitch my waistband facing, my seam allowance, I beg your pardon, to my waistband facing. So this is what my understitching looks like. I'm hoping that you can see it clearly. Now I didn't start where my seam started, just because I need to go ahead and finish off my waistband. So I didn't want to bring my understitching over just too much. So I started part of the way in, and I stopped about 1.5 inches about from my raw edge. Let's double check. Yes, 1.5 inches exactly. I'm getting so much better at my estimations, you guys. Anyways, now that the understitching has been done, I'm going to fold my waistband facing back towards my waistband main, right sides together. And I want to make sure that the pressed edge of my waistband facing lines up with the seam of my waistband main from attaching the waistband to the gathering of the skirt. So I'm just making sure that it just covers it just a titch over that waistline seam, and I'm going to pin it into place. Once that is pinned into place, I then want to stitch downwards from my stitching at my waistband, at the top of my waistband. I want to now stitch down my zipper tape so that I can attach my waistband facing to my zipper tape as well. I'm going to go back to my machine and stitch it down. Now, some people like to use the invisible zipper foot when attaching the facing. Again, your zipper teeth will run in your invisible zipper foot, and you attach your facing to your skirt main. Now, I don't prefer that finish. I prefer to use my regular zipper foot and to butt up close to my zipper teeth. The reason is I like to have just a little bit extra give on the back of my facing, and that reduces the chance of my facing getting caught in the zipper tape. Now, the downside to invisible zippers, even the best invisible zippers, is that in my experience, they can get ruined a lot faster than a regular zip. And so you really want to take care not to get your fabric stuck between your teeth. And so I just like to attach my facing just a titch bit away from my invisible zipper teeth. I'm going to go back to my machine now and run a stitch downwards from the top of my waistband where I stitched it down to the turned up portion of my waistband facing right here. So my facing piece has been sewn down to my zipper tape, and it's just about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper coil itself. So if you look closely, this is where my stitching is, and this is where my coil is. Now we want to go ahead and eliminate quite a bit of this bulk at the intersection of our waistband top and our center back seam. So again, I'm going to use my pinking shears, and I'm going to trim down first the corner of my seams. So diagonally, I'm going to remove quite a bit of the fabric from right at the intersection of our zip right here. I'm going to take it over just a little bit more and trim off. So I've trimmed off my seam allowances to this much. Now with my zipper tape, now that I have freed it up, I'm going to go ahead and trim down the facing piece like so. Now with my main back piece, I could also trim it down just a bit. Now I don't want to go too far down because remember that I had finished off my center back seam with my serger. Now that that is done, I'm just sticking my finger in between my waistband main and my facing piece like so. And I'm bending my excess seam allowance towards the back of my skirt. With that in place, I'm just flipping my skirt piece out. And this is what the top of our skirt now looks like. Now I'm going to grab my orange stick, and I just want to push out my center back seam just to get those seam allowances to lay flat. Now on the inside, now that it has been turned out, you can see where my facing is as opposed to where my zipper teeth are. You can see that it's just about 1/8 of an inch or so away from my zipper teeth. Now I'm just going to play with it a little bit more. Because we didn't understitch right the way to the zipper tape, we just want to go ahead and try rolling our seam allowances to the inside so that you have a clean finish towards the top of your waistband. And this is what it looks like. Now, the next thing to do will be to take it to your ironing machine and just give it a nice press. You might want to use a pressing cloth just to protect your zipper teeth from the heat of the iron. So I've given it a press, and this is now what my center back seam looks like with the finished edge of the waistband and my zipper. So if I zip my zipper up, you can see how nicely it closes off toward the top. Now I do feel like I could go ahead and push out my zipper tape just a little bit more just to get a more angular shape towards my top waistband. Now at the end of this, I am going to add a hook and an eye right to the very top of my waistband. I just like that added security to secure my waistband seams together right at the top, and that is why I left just an 1/8 of an inch gap when I was putting in the zipper tape. Now you're going to go ahead and repeat this process on the opposite side of your center back seam, and then your skirt will be finished. Now, of course, as I said, I have lots more to do on this skirt. I need to finish off my side seams, but I do want to fit it to my client one more time just to make sure that she's comfortable with the ease amount that I left in at the waistband. So that, you guys, is how I install my invisible zippers in my skirt. Now, it looks a little bit weird here because, of course, one side of my waistband has now been finished and the next side of my waistband is raw. But I'm going to go ahead now and finish up my skirt, and then I'll get back to finishing my waistband. So I hope you guys enjoyed this demonstration of how to insert an invisible zipper. All right, you guys, there you have it. That was my quick tutorial on how I go about installing invisible zippers. As I said at the beginning of this video, it is not always foolproof, and sometimes I have to do it more than one time. But usually I'm able to install my invisible zipper pretty perfect on my first go. And as with anything else, practice makes progress. So if you don't get it right the first time, feel free to grab your seam ripper, take your stitches out, and give it another go. Do not let invisible zippers rob you of your sewing joy. So if you enjoyed this video, you guys, I would really appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up. You know, the YouTube algorithm and all that loves that sort of thing. But only like this video if you actually do. Now, be sure to leave me a comment in the comment section and let me know, what are your thoughts about invisible zippers? Have you been afraid of them previously? Have you found a foolproof way to install your invisible zippers? Did you find this tutorial helpful? Are you going to try it in the future? Let me know in the comments box down below. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. Now, if you have gotten this far into the video, please consider hitting that subscribe icon and the notification bell so that you never miss any of my upcoming videos. I'm reminding you that subscription costs you absolutely nothing, but it does guarantee you a spot right here in my YouTube sewing family. So that's all I have for you today, folks. And until next time, stay calm, stay cool, stay safe, and absolutely keep sewing. Peace.